Chapter 1. The World Before the Great War. Introduction. A world on the edge. The dawn of the 20th century was a time of extraordinary optimism and extraordinary tension. The world stood at the crossroads of progress and destruction. Steam engines roared across continents. Telegraph wires carried messages faster than ever, and great cities glowed with the light of a new age. Yet beneath this glittering surface, Europe was a powder keg waiting for a spark. For decades, the continent's major powers had competed for global dominance, building empires, expanding armies, and weaving a web of fragile alliances that would soon pull all of them into the abyss of war. It was an age of invention, but also of arrogance, an age of civilization shadowed by ambition. And in the summer of 1914, that ambition would ignite the deadliest conflict the world had ever known. 1. Europe's balance of power. In the years before the First World War, Europe was dominated by 6 mighty empires. The British Empire, ruling over a quarter of the world's population. The German Empire, young, industrial, and fiercely ambitious. France, proud but haunted by its defeat in the Franco-Prussian War. Russia, vast and autocratic, ruled by Tsar Nicholas II. Austria-Hungary, a fragile patchwork of ethnicities. The Ottoman Empire, once powerful, now fading into decline. Each nation saw itself as the center of civilization, but every empire also feared the rise of another. This delicate system of power, a balance held together by treaties, marriages, and military planning, was as intricate as it was unstable. The Germans called it realpolitik, the politics of power and survival. The British called it maintaining the balance. Historians later would call it a countdown to catastrophe.
2. The rise of nationalism. Across Europe, nationalism burned like wildfire. It was both a unifying force and a deadly poison. In Germany and Italy, nationalism had built strong new states, but in Austria-Hungary and the Balkans, it threatened to tear old empires apart. Millions of people, Serbs, Croats, Czechs, Poles, longed to govern themselves rather than serve distant emperors. Nowhere was this tension more explosive than in the Balkans, a region often called the powder keg of Europe. The fall of the Ottoman Empire had left a vacuum, and new nations, Serbia, Bulgaria, Romania, Greece, fought bitterly to fill it. Russia saw itself as the protector of the Slavic peoples. Austria-Hungary saw Serbia as a direct threat, and Germany, bound to Austria by alliance, watched closely. National pride had become obsession. Honor was more valuable than peace. 3. The arms race and military alliances. Between 1900 and 1914, Europe became a continent armed to the teeth. In Britain, the Royal Navy built massive battleships, the dreadnoughts, unmatched in firepower. Germany, under Kaiser Wilhelm II, responded with its own fleet, determined to challenge British supremacy at sea. In factories across Europe, workers toiled day and night forging rifles, artillery, and shells. The invention of the machine gun, the airplane, and chemical explosives promised wars more mechanized and more horrific than ever before. 2 rival alliances divided the continent. The Triple Alliance, Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy. The Triple Entente, France, Russia, and Britain. What began as defensive pacts soon became chains that would drag entire nations into war, even if only one nation was attacked. Every plan for peace was shadowed by a plan for war.
4. Empires and colonies. Beyond Europe, the struggle for power stretched across the world. The British ruled India, Canada, Australia, and vast territories in Africa. The French controlled Algeria, Indochina, and West Africa. Germany, late to the game of empire, seized colonies in Africa and the Pacific, but wanted more. Every map of the world was a contest of color: red for Britain, blue for France, yellow for Germany. Colonial competition fueled rivalry at home. School children were taught to love their flags and hate their neighbors. Politicians spoke of destiny and racial superiority. Newspapers printed patriotic headlines predicting glory in the next war. Imperialism had given Europe wealth, but also pride and paranoia. 5. Technology and the modern age. The early 1900s were years of breathtaking innovation. Electric lights illuminated city streets. Automobiles and airplanes transformed travel. Radio connected people across oceans. But science served not only progress, it served power. Nations poured money into laboratories designing more accurate rifles, faster ships, deadlier bombs. Military generals, inspired by technology, dreamed of quick and decisive wars. Few understood the irony. The same machines that symbolized modern civilization would soon destroy it. 6. The ruling elite and the failure of diplomacy. Europe was led by a generation of monarchs who were often related, cousins bound by blood and rivalry. Kaiser Wilhelm II of Germany, King George V of Britain, Tsar Nicholas II of Russia. All were grandchildren of Queen Victoria. They wrote letters to each other, called each other Nicky and Willie, and exchanged gifts. Yet beneath the smiles, mistrust grew. Diplomats held banquets and signed treaties, but the real decisions were made in military offices and royal palaces. Pride and ego replaced reason. By 1914, Europe had become a continent of alliances so entangled that one spark, one assassination, would ignite the entire system. 7. The calm before the storm. In the spring of 1914, few people imagined the nightmare that was coming. In London, cafes buzzed with talk of art and politics. In Paris, young couples danced to jazz in open-air pavilions. In Berlin, factories thrummed with ambition. In Vienna, the opera season was at its height. The newspapers spoke of peace. The people dreamed of progress. Yet in the city of Sarajevo, in a small corner of the Balkans, fate was already moving. There, a group of young nationalists plotted to strike a blow for their people, an act they believed would bring freedom, but instead would plunge the entire world into darkness. Ending scene. Narrative transition to Chapter 2. And so the world stood still, poised between light and shadow. No one yet knew that within months Europe's golden summer would end in thunder, that empires would crumble, millions would die, and the very idea of civilization would be rewritten in blood and smoke. The shot that would change the world was only weeks away, and it would echo across the globe. End. Next chapter. The Spark in Sarajevo.